Hey listeners, the episode you're about to hear is one that we recorded before our first episode aired. This podcast is a passion project for both of us, and we're learning a lot as we go, mostly learning from our own mistakes. Unfortunately, with this episode, we didn't have that opportunity because we hadn't yet heard our mistakes, so please excuse the imperfect audio quality, awkward pauses, excessive ums, and background acknowledgments. Editing can only correct so much, but we really appreciate you taking the time to listen and grow with us, and we'll be doing our best to improve in future episodes.
All right, hello and welcome to Lion and Mouse Commentary. We are your hosts, Holland
And Tori.
Two best friends as different as a lion and a mouse. This is part 2 of our Stranger Things Season 1 episode. So if you have not listened to part 1, please go back and listen to that, where we covered plot, story, and cohesion, both mine and Tori's reviews of that. And then Tori did her review of characters, giving it, what was it?
2 out of 3. I think I said 3 out of 3, but it's 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 points for that. So we're going to get into my review of the character aspect of Stranger Things Season 1. We're just going to pick up right where we left off. So, a total possible 3 points. I gave this 2.5 points out of 3. I had some similar opinions as Tori's. I think overall, these characters are exceptionally well introduced and well developed. So overall, I think the characters are just really well developed. In the first episode, they're all introduced very well. You get these kind of snapshots of who they are in that first episode. You kind of know how this friend dynamic group works. You kind of see Will. I think introducing Will in that first episode is so important, because if Will was not a likable character, we wouldn't care that he's missing.
Right.
And if his friend group didn't care about him, we wouldn't care that he's missing. And he's kind of the whole caveat of the story, is that Will Byers is missing. So the fact that they established Will as a likable character in the first episode, even in his conversation with Mike, the Demogorgon got me, in his conversation with Dustin when they're riding their bikes home, we really care that he's in danger and that he's missing and that he's been pulled out of this friend group and that he does play a necessary part in this friend group. So I think that's really important with Will. I think the fact that he's, kind of easygoing, his friends are kind of like the 2 cookies of the Oreo, and he's kind of like that soft cream in the middle that kind of keeps them kind of working well together. So the fact that we care about him, I think, makes him more than just a MacGuffin, which he could have easily been in this movie.
You keep saying movie, but show.
Show, right. And then having the flashbacks integrated into the plot just helped further develop him as a character. I think Mike, Dustin, and Lucas as a kind of that trio, they're very believable. I think in a way their characters are a bit like archetypical. Like Mike is clearly the leader, Lucas is the rational one, Dustin's the goofy one. I think that it's a little predictable in their kind of dynamic together. I think they really established that Mike cares the most about Will between the 3 of them. They kind of establish him and Will as like the closest of their friend group. They're best friends, kind of first, if you will. Even though he's helping Eleven, he wants to get back to finding Will. I think I had a note kind of disagreeing a little bit that his reaction to Will's body being found was kind of realistic. If you're seeing your best friend's body being drug out of a lake, like, you're not going to be super nice to this total stranger you met like 2 days ago. But we kind of talked about that a little bit in the last episode. I think that Dustin and Lucas as characters, they counteract each other very well. I think that even though Dustin is kind of this goofy, I don't want to say he's like this goofy sidekick character, but he kind of is in the show. But then when Lucas and Mike have this falling out about 11, leading them to this junkyard, he has enough good sense to be like, this isn't okay. Like, right. So he still has that level of sensibility, and, he's not a stupid goofball. His personality doesn't diminish his intelligence. I think that was a really good character choice with him. I think that Lucas, this interesting aspect of him as a character, that he doesn't want Eleven to become like, to come in and be integrated into their friend group and change their dynamic. But then he also has this very strong loyalty to finding Will. So I found watching it this time that Lucas not wanting to include 11 really wasn't this, this angry, exclusive, hard character. It was more so that watching it this time, I realized Lucas over and over and over says, we have to find Will. We're supposed to be finding Will. Mm-hmm. Mike, you're not supposed to be playing around with this girl. We're supposed to be finding Will. And then when they figure out they can follow their compasses, Lucas is the one that says, I don't care if she says it's dangerous or not. I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to go find Will. And I think the first time I watched through this, I thought it was kind of ridiculous for Lucas to have that perspective, because we as the viewer know the danger that he's about to put himself in. But in watching it this time, kind of thinking through it critically, it's like this, middle school boy, like, his objective has not changed since the beginning of the movie.
Right.
Lucas
is probably the most consistent.
He's extremely consistent as a character, and he's extremely bold as a character to say, I don't care what this weirdo says is dangerous, I'm going to get on my bike and go find my friend.
And I think the good thing about Lucas is that he is very consistent, but I don't find him boring either.
Right. So I think that Nancy and Steve have a great dynamic as characters together. I think you watch the two of them kind of have this puppy love together, but then they both, each of them independently and together, have this arc that I think is done really well in this show. I think that Nancy is kind of established as this like really smart, brainy, she's not a nerd, but she's very smart. She's
very academic.
Very academic, high performing. Steve is this kind of delinquent, character, but they admit, both of them are cliches. They both call each other a cliche and they kind of admit to that, but watching it and watching these characters throughout the season, they really don't stay cliches throughout the show, where they really could have. It could have been very easy for both of them to stay these, high school 80s film cliches.
I'd wager to argue, though, that the characters that you think are cliche, they're only cliche because you don't see them outside of the context that you see them, like school.
Right.
They're cliche at school, but how often do you see those cliche characters outside of school?
Right.
And I think that the reason that they don't stay cliche is because we get the opportunity to see them outside of school in, high pressure, high stakes situations. Mm-hmm. And that's really where, more of somebody's true personality comes out, is in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's good that we get the opportunity to see them outside of the school couple.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like that Nancy, they establish her in the beginning as this very academic character, and then they keep that consistent when she's, looking through books, kind of researching what the Demogorgon is, the fact that it's a predator and it goes after blood like a shark, and so they kind of tie back into that character trait that they've given her as this kind of academically driven character, and now she's the one trying to figure out okay, well, how could we trap this monster, and think through that process kind of rationally. I think that they do a good job of kind of showing her as this kind of kinder character. The fact that she, reaches out to Jonathan, she kind of feels bad for him because his brother's missing, and it's this small town community and Jonathan's this outcast. Oh, when
he's at the bulletin board?
Yeah, he's this outcast character, and she's she has this compassion for him, whereas Steve and his friends are just, kind of making fun of him behind his back, or not even behind his back. I think that they kind of establish her. I think it's kind of realistic that she gets kind of blinded by, wanting to hang out with Steve at his house, and she's kind of a jerk to Barb about it. She's like, you can come and be my guardian. And then Barb tries to do what Nancy said she could come along for, and she's a complete jerk to Barb, and it's just go home. I don't want you here. You literally invited me along. I didn't want to come and sit so that I could be your guardian.
Yeah.
And now you are just being a complete jerk to me.
Wouldn't that make you so mad if I did something like
yes,
that? Yes,
I would be so mad at you.
Yes.
But in the way that they make Nancy, like, Nancy does this as a character, but then she has a very real reaction to Barb being missing, and when Eleven finds that Barb is dead, like, her reactions are very real, and so you find that, like, she really did care about Barb. Like, Barb really was her best friend, and so she regrets treating Barb that way.
Yeah.
And so it's not that she is this unlikable character because of what she did to Barb. She has this real remorse and regret.
Yeah, I think seeing the true remorse, like, a character can do something cruddy, but, like, if there's a moment where they truly have that remorse and wish that they could have that resolution, it's almost like okay, like, it's fine. Like, I forgive you as a viewer, and we can move on to whatever the next step is.
Yeah.
So it's almost, I feel like sometimes as viewers, we hold things against characters, whether that's warranted or not. But I think in this situation, we may hold it against Nancy for part of the season, and then she has that moment, and you're like, okay, I forgive you.
Yeah. And one thing I really like in this movie, or I keep saying movie, it's not a movie, it's a TV show. One thing I really like in this series that they do is the relationship between Mike and Nancy. That sibling dynamic between them is so different, and it's almost stereotypical in the way that there's so much animosity between them. But then by the end of the show, they're working together, and you see these moments where they do genuinely care for each other more than just caring for each other's safety. And I think that that's something that's not always portrayed in, film and TV shows, is that siblings, can be very different, and there's an age difference, and they're, middle school boy and a high school girl. There's a lot of difference in those two individuals on a good day, even if they have a good relationship. But the fact that they're willing to still come together and work together and talk to each other, well, and, the way that they talk to each other when they're at the school building that, the sensory deprivation swimming pool for 11 and stuff. And there's not animosity between them then, so they're able to kind of put aside those differences and work together. And I think that was a good character choice between the two of them. It makes them both more likable as characters.
Yeah.
I think Barb is a good character. I think in, the fact that Barb, knows that she's not cool and she's never going to be part of the cool kids, and that she's a friend to Nancy even when Nancy's not a friend to her. I think that's one of the reasons that the whole Justice for Barb meme exists, is because they establish her as this very good character. And also,
she's got that healthy level of self-awareness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then she's also a good friend to Nancy, and so you also care when she is missing and taken by the Demogorgon. You care that has happened to her, and you care for that. You understand why Nancy's reaction is so real, because you like Barb as a character, and you see her be a good friend to Nancy. So it's warranted that Nancy cares so much to find out why she's missing and what's happened to her.
That's fair.
Hopper and Joyce, another fantastic dynamic. I think I could probably talk for another hour just about Hopper and Joyce because they're so good. I think that Hopper, he's introduced as this cranky loser of a man who's, this kind of washed out chief of police. But then as the story goes, he kind of unfolds. You see more layers of him, and he's very intelligent, he's very deductive, he's suspicious, he doesn't take things at face value. You watch him stand there, we talked about Benny when, is shot, and then Hopper goes there, and, it's been set up to look like Benny's committed suicide, and Hopper's standing there looking at him, and as the viewer, it wasn't suicide. But Hopper's standing there, and he's, looking at there, and you think maybe does he believe that this is suicide? And then later in the series, you find out, or later in the season, you find out, no, he didn't. He didn't believe it from the get-go. So all of these things he's been suspicious of the whole time, and then you later find out, oh, that's why he said that. That's why he told them, why he told, the scientists, this, that, and the other. It was because he was already thinking 2 steps down the road. And I think that using that as giving him that level of intelligence and cleverness as a character is just really good. It helps move the plot along and gives the people of Hawkins really a fighting chance against this seemingly untouchable adversary of this lab.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that having him, genuinely care about Will being missing, like, it really feels believable, especially once you see his relationship with his daughter.
Right.
And how
there's a lot of parallels through the whole season between Will and Sarah.
Yeah. And the fact that the way that he talks to Joyce, he's like the one person in town that doesn't treat her like she's crazy.
Right.
And the fact that of this cranky, grouchy, pill popping, beer drinking cop would talk to Joyce so gently just shows that he has this layer underneath him of somebody who really does care about
that hidden compassion.
Yeah. Joyce is kind of like the super mom of this show. Some notes I have on her is like that she's I think one of the things with her is that she is so incredibly persistent. Like she knows the whole town thinks she's crazy. Like, and she doesn't care if anybody believes her. She's so driven to find her son. And, she's even willing to go up against Jonathan, who's trying to tell her like that she's absolutely crazy. And, she's willing to go up against Jonathan, who she loves just as much as she loves Will. But she knows that she's right. I think that the fact that Joyce is willing to stand up for herself is an admirable trait of hers. Because I think it'd be so easy to make like this crazy, seemingly, town crazy lady that nobody believes anything is happening to make her this kind of pushover character that she's just gonna, roll over. And I think that the the fact that she like goes and gets the Christmas lights and
right
and makes letters on, I mean, that's extremely resourceful. Like, I don't know if I would think of that if I was in her situation. Two kind of minor characters that I think are really great. One is Benny, like which you kind of touched on.
Yeah.
Just this kind-hearted man who sees a kid stealing from his restaurant, and he's this, very like aggressive looking guy,
big burly bald head,
right? And for him to see what kind of kid is stealing fries off of his kitchen counter, and for him to, like, as soon as he looks at her, and it's great acting on the actor's part, like he looks at her and realizes, okay, so something's not right. This kid needs help.
Yeah.
Like, so that's just such a small moment, and it's very brief, but I think it's just done really well. Yeah. And I think that's why, people like you and me would watch it and say justice for Benny too. Yeah. Because in just one moment, it's such a short scene and a short moment, you realize like this man has enough compassion and intelligence to realize like this kid, there's something wrong, that this kid looks like this and would be stealing from me. Like, let's try and like have a little compassion and take care of this kid.
Right.
And then another character that I think is great, very kind of a minor character, is Flo. Like, she is the best counterpart to Hopper. Like, his assistant.
For a second, I was like, Flo? But the secretary at the police station.
She's such a good counterpart to him. And she's, when she's, like, one of the lines I thought was funny is when she says about, Jonathan getting in a fight and everything. It's like, only love would make you do something that crazy and stupid.
Yeah.
Like, she's so intelligent and insightful.
There's also a line in that scene that I think Nancy says something like, oh, he's not my boyfriend. And she goes, does he know that?
Right. She's just this smart woman. She's quick-witted. She's a great counterpart to Hopper. And I think it's kind of neat. Like, I found myself watching it this time thinking, like, oh, Flo's coming through for Hopper.
Yeah.
Like, because she's always on the radio talking to him and stuff. So I think she's a great...
Flo must pull some crazy hours.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm going to touch on 11 for a little bit. I think Millie Bobby Brown is absolutely exceptional in this role. I think there's a reason that she has, sustained a good acting career is because she's extremely talented.
Right. She wasn't like a one-hit wonder child. Like, she's continuing to do projects that are good.
Right. And the fact that she performs this character who has little to no dialogue and gives the viewer a reason to care and have compassion for her character is just really well done.
Yeah.
And I know that also contributes to like the script and the directing. It's not just any one person that made that work, but Millie Bobby Brown, I would have to commend her on her acting ability. It would be very easy to take a character with limited dialogue and make they appear unintelligent because they speak so little. And she appears very intelligent. The fact that she has these incredible powers. I mean, you watch in flashbacks, she can kill people with these powers that she has. And yet she uses them. There's so many moments where she doesn't use them. Like when she doesn't make the Millennium Falcon float for Dustin when he wants her to, and it's like, but then she flips a car, which is a pretty iconic scene in the show.
Or makes Troy pee himself.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that part was kind of dumb, but, I mean, it's for laughs, I guess. But then the fact that she, like you mentioned, like, here's this girl that has no childhood, and then she's put in this friend group of boys who just slowly teach her, like, what being a friend is. I think that's a good theme to kind of have.
Yeah.
If they're going to kind of teach her anything, it's not like, we're going to teach you how to be a real girl. It's like, we're going to just teach you what a friend is like. We're trying to find our friend, and we're going to show you what a friend is in the process. I thought that was just a really good decision to make with her as a character. I think they do a good job with the two deputies that Hopper has of making them kind of bumbling. I think Mike's parents being kind of stupid and clueless, it's like... the fact that they make the character of the dad is literally wrong about everything. Like, everything he says, he's wrong about. And I think that helps add to the humor. And I think it's necessary, even though I think it is kind of tropey, for both the cops and Mike's parents. It is kind of an overused trope. I think it's necessary because it gives a reasoning why these kids have not been caught. And why 11 has not been caught. And why Hopper is able to kind of go around and investigate this lab, and nobody's like, Hopper, what are you doing? So the fact that they're not as quick on the uptake, if you will, it gives reason why for the 8 episodes, these characters are allowed to investigate this different mystery without being thwarted or stopped by, other authority figures. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of the last little kind of category, I guess, is characters, is that the villains are so hateable.
Oh, yeah.
You absolutely hate Dr. Brenner. You hate what he does with 11.
Yeah.
He's ambitious. He's manipulative.
He's intelligent, which I think is scary.
Yeah.
When you have a villain that's very, very intelligent, it's like... very intimidating, and you just hate it.
Yeah. He's ambiguous. He's essentially like a cult leader.
Right.
It's like they took all of the attributes of cult leaders and they put him in this character. The way that he talks to 11 is just very, manipulative and condescending.
I think also, I didn't talk about this, and I hope I don't steal your thunder, but I hate when you learn about what he did to 11's mother, and how that they attempted to like press charges against the lab, and she was basically just branded like a complete psycho.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's another opportunity where you're just like, I hate what this man does. Like, everything about his experiments are just absolutely atrocious.
Yeah. And then even kind of the like secondary character is that agent that, kills Benny and then tries to like rope in Scott.
The lady agent?
Yeah. She's the one that kills Benny. She tries to rope in, Mr. Clark by getting him to like, we're interested in the AV club. And, then she meets with Mike's parents and talks about how, this girl is dangerous. And, so she's also so unlikable. And that's the intent of her characters, that you hate her because she's the villain.
Right.
And then I think that, I think Scott Clark, the science teacher, is a good character.
I like Mr. Clark. He's just very stereotypical.
He's a little bit of a stereotype, and he's kind of minor, but I think he's kind of necessary. You need this kind of like advisor character to kind of the boys.
I think it's good that the boys have like another adult that they trust that's outside of their family.
Right. So. And I think that it's necessary. They needed some kind of catalyst. You know, you have to give your characters in developing a story. You have to give your characters, they have to kind of hit a wall, and then they have to be able to move past that wall. And so Scott Clark is kind of that catalyst to kind of get them past it with the sensory deprivation tank and things like that.
And I think, you know, for the guy who plays him, I don't know his name, but he does a very good job at being, you know, believable and caring about these kids without it being unbelievable that like he doesn't care so much that he's like involved in their lives outside of school, really. But it's just like in the context that he holds, you know, he's a very believable, you know, considerate teacher that I think kind of helps just that small bit that he has. Yeah.
Another note that I really like with the characters is I really like towards the end of the series, the show, the season, the fact that I think they give Nancy becomes such a likable character when she's the only character that braves the Upside Down.
Right.
She's the only character that goes in and literally is like face to face with the Demogorgon because she's looking for Barb. Like that, I think, is so important for her as a character, not just because it makes her so likable and it shows this level of bravery that she has, but it also shows the lengths she's willing to go to look for Barb, to find Barb,
right,
and find her friend. And so it kind of, in a way, it kind of makes up for the fact that she was a jerk to Barb a few episodes earlier, because she's willing to do pretty incredible things. And then I love the scene where Steve beats the Demogorgon with a bat. I think that's important to him. I think he has this arc where he's this kind of like delinquent. He's mean to Jonathan. He breaks his camera. He's got these crappy friends. He gets in a fight with Jonathan. Like he's pretty unlikable. They paint him as this pretty unlikable character. But then he has this moment that I don't think is an oops, I've changed moment, because the one thing you see in him from the beginning of the show is how much he really cares for Nancy.
That's true.
And how he really cares about her. He's gentle with her. He's not this like braggadocious jerk with Nancy. He really cares about her. He sits in her room and is willing to help her study because that's what she said. You said you were going to help me study, so now help me study. And he is this kind of like cocky, flirty guy, but then he kind of comes to fruition at the end when he ran out of that house from the Demogorgon and he's about to leave, which is a very realistic reaction, I think. He's about to leave because Nancy told him, get out. And he turns around and he looks back at the house and he sees, the lights flickering and he knows what's coming and he goes back into the house. And I think that in that aspect of his character development, it's when you see that it, regardless of anything else, that any of this, relationship that he has, crapping on Jonathan the whole time, he cares enough about Nancy to go back in the house and fight off a Demogorgon, in a life or death situation. I think that's, not just a really fun, enjoyable part of the show, this action scene that's really engaging and interesting. It's kind of the climax of that whole plot line. And it's fun to watch, but I think it's also important for Steve as a character. Mm-hmm. He sees her with Jonathan. He doesn't understand what's going on. He suspects that, Nancy's cheating on him, and he's still willing to not do kind of the impulsive high school thing. That's like, well, fine, if Jonathan's, the guy you want, then he can save you. He goes back in the house for her. The biggest reason that I took off half a point was because of Jonathan. So I
reason why I took a point off.
Stand him. I think they try really hard to make him likable by like, oh, Mom, I worked an extra shift at work. Oh my gosh, I have this great relationship with Will because I told him about this should I stay or should I go song. We listened to it together. Like, no, he's so obnoxious. He stalks Nancy, and and he takes pictures of her, and they're trying to paint him as like, oh, but he's this poor misunderstood guy. Oh, he had to kill a bunny. Like, no, he's a creeper to Nancy, and then the biggest thing I hate is he is so rude and mean to his mom.
It's true.
Like, this is the woman who raised you. We've established your dad is the biggest dirtbag ever and you don't like him, and yet you somehow take his side that your mom has lost her mind, and you're yelling at her in the street that like, oh, the rest of us are playing a funeral for Will, blah, blah, blah. Like, I get, and my brother and I were talking, and he made the point. He's like, well, I think, though, kind of at the point in the film, or the series, you're supposed to kind of, Jonathan is necessary to doubt his mom because you don't know if his mom is crazy or not. And it's like, I get that. You might need that to kind of give you, to make you question Joyce.
Sure, it's a good plot, but it doesn't mean you have to like him.
Well, and I don't think it had to be Jonathan. Like,
that's true.
I think that in doing that, they make him completely unlikable.
It could have been Lonnie.
It could have been Lonnie.
Because, I mean, they're going to throw Lonnie into whatever scene they feel like throwing him in anyway.
Right.
So they could have, that whole confrontation could have been Lonnie.
Right. It could have been anybody else. I think you could have had another character, maybe Joyce was like, I know that I think the impression is that they kind of get Hopper. They kind of build this relationship between Hopper and Joyce kind of romantically, but you could have had Joyce seeing someone else at the time, and her boyfriend is questioning everything, and I mean, you could have had anybody, but the fact they made it Jonathan, and Jonathan's supposed to be Will's brother, and he's supposed to be this likable character that is kind of this love triangle between Steve, Nancy, and himself. Like, I just think overall, I think it was kind of a poor choice to make Jonathan that character if they weren't just going to go ahead and just make him a villain. Like, go ahead and make him this unlikable kind of jerk to his mom. Like, go ahead and just go with that. Like, if that's what you want to do, make him unlikable, but don't make him that horrible to his mom, and then also make him Nancy's, like, a love interest for Nancy. Like,
yeah.
I just think, I think, aside from the fact that I can't stand him, to the fact that, like, why did it have to be him making those decisions? For that reason, I had to take off half a point for characters. I think that it's just...
Yeah, Jonathan Byers is the lowest ranked character for both of us.
He's horrible. I can't stand him. And then, in later seasons, like, I mean, I think that he has some, like, redeeming qualities that it's like, okay, well, he's willing to go, face the Demogorgon with Nancy, but it's like, it's not redeeming enough to, like, make up for the fact that he wouldn't believe his mom. Then he lies to his mom. He doesn't tell his mom. He's like gonna go confront this monster after everything your mom has been through, and you're gonna be, I don't want her to worry. Like, that's a load of crap, dude. Like, in addition to you being horrible to your mom up to this point, now you're gonna risk her losing another son because you don't want her to worry. Like, terrible. Horrible. Sorry, Jonathan. You're the worst, and I'm taking off half a point. So, overall, characters, 2.5 out of 3 points for me.
Okay. Now we're moving on to aesthetics.
Okay.
So, this is anything visual or audio or effects. So, I gave it 2 out of 2 points.
Okay.
Full points. My first note is that the intros, the font,
yeah,
the song,
mm-hmm.
the film grain.
Yeah.
Beautifully done.
Yeah.
Iconic that, you see that and you know what you're watching now. It's become renowned.
Yeah.
Like, it's on t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just fantastic. It really sets the context of the time period well. I really like the intros. 10 out of 10 intro. They use a lot of cigarette smoke specifically,
mm-hmm.
to establish tense or stressful moments.
Huh. That's interesting.
I don't know if you noticed, but Hop, Joyce, the other deputies, in tense or stressful moments. I think, I might be wrong, but I think there's one moment where you see Mr. Wheeler with a cigarette, and it's always in moments that are tense or stressful. It's like, it's a physical indicator of where that character is at that moment. And I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But I never noticed that.
Yeah, and so they use it. So I guess that's a prop and a aesthetic note, because it's not just the cigarette, but it's like the haze of the smoke covers the frame. So there's like a haze to the frame.
Mm-hmm.
I do wish that there were more establishing shots in episode 2. Everything's cut in really close. And what I mean by that is, like, when I was in film school, I was taught that every time that you go to any new location, and that can even be another room in the same building,
mm-hmm.
but you should start with a wide establishing shot. And then you cut in closer to your characters.
Okay.
In episode 2, there are not many establishing shots.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing. I didn't take a point off or anything for it, but it could potentially disorient a viewer,
mm-hmm.
Because that's the purpose of an establishing shot, is to establish where you are at the moment. So when you cut to a new location or new room and you're zoomed in on somebody immediately,
mm-hmm.
you might be like, where the heck are we? So it's just kind of like a minor aesthetic note. It's nothing, and it might even bleed a little bit into personal preference.
Yeah.
I think sound design is really great in the phone calls that happen throughout the whole show.
Yeah.
So there are lots of phone calls at Joyce's specifically that happen between Joyce and Will. And there's a level of sound design to that where it's, I mean, yes, it's the 80s, but there is extra grain. Like, there's a bad signal. There's a lot of echoey in and out with Will's voice. You hear the Demogorgon get closer, so it gets properly louder and softer depending on how close the proximity is. I just think a lot of those things are very good sound design. And even in the instances of those phone calls where it gets cut or it explodes the phone, the sound effects in those situations are very, very good. So props to the sound design team all through episode 2, because I think episode 2 is where a lot of the phone calls happen. I found it an interesting choice. It's a very stark juxtaposition that they do a lot of edit cuts between Nancy and Steve in Steve's room and Barb in the Upside Down when she's taken. And it cuts almost too quickly back and forth between the two. And so it's almost like you don't know how to feel or which one you should try to follow. Right. Because it's hard to follow both at the same time. So I'm sure they did that on purpose, but it is an odd juxtaposition. In that context. It's almost like they could have cut Barb in the Upside Down with anything. They could have cut it with Will in the Upside Down, or they could have cut it with Nancy the next morning, or anything like that. But they chose like the actual moment that Nancy and Steve are together in his room, that they're going to cut between that and the Upside Down. And I thought that was very interesting. Another sound design note, super unsettling, but every time, and it starts with the Coke can. 11 is shown crushing that Coke can with her mind. Yeah. And there is that super, super high-pitched squeal that happens at the completion of the crushing. And it's like almost like you feel like you're having the splitting headache, but it's super effective sound design because you know, we've already established that these sorts of activities and exercises cause harm, physical harm to 11's mind and body. That's why she's always nosebleeding and things like that. So that squeal just kind of like hurts you, not real pain, obviously, but it just kind of like gives you that discomfort as a viewer, and you can suddenly understand this is not comfortable for 11 either.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was very good. I just think that overall this series has such good aesthetics across the board. I have more aesthetic notes than I do plot or character notes. One thing I noticed is that this is a bad thing. Hopper and his deputies are at the lab.
Uh-huh.
Things are dark. The double doors open.
Uh-huh.
And sheriff, or the deputy wearing his glasses,
uh-huh.
the light
mm-hmm.
shines off of his glasses so much they're like high beams.
Yeah.
And so you're no longer looking at Hop having his conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You're now just focused on the bro in the dark who has laser eyes. And I just thought that was bad. Yep. They could have put some sort of film over his glasses. Mm-hmm. They could have, like, scrimmed that light. They could have done something.
Yeah.
Maybe they kept it because they liked it. I personally did not. Yeah. I found it incredibly distracting in that shot. Yeah, he literally looks like he has his high beams on his car on.
That's funny.
I do like the shots where Hop and his other deputy are in the library reading, and it's paired with this music. And the music is this building, tense, like, bass. There's not a lot of tenor in that. And it just sort of, like, makes you feel like, oh my gosh, what are they discovering? What are they learning? I can't wait for them to share that information with us. It's like an effective musical momentum to that moment. So I thought that was very good. Okay. When they go into the upside down from the lab, what the heck is that floating everywhere? Is it fungus? Is it snow? Is it dust? Is it ash? Whenever they're in the upside down, there is glitter in the air everywhere. It's not actual glitter, but it's something that's just constantly in the air catching light. And it gets distracting for me.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where I'm like, okay, I get it. There's something in the air, but now I'm just watching it float and I'm not really paying attention. I just found it more distracting than effective.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of that. Here's something that they should have caught. Joyce sees the Demogorgon pressed to the wall. She hacks a hole in the house. Uh-huh. And then you see the hole from the front yard. Uh-huh. And there is no debris.
Nope, there's not.
No debris.
Yep.
And I'm like, no. That should have been caught.
Yeah.
They should have thrown some debris on the porch because it doesn't look real at that point.
Yeah.
I've now been disconnected from the reality that she just hacked a hole in her house with an axe.
Right.
Because now there's no evidence of that happening. There's more debris inside the house than there is outside, which I get, but she's pushed all the way through to the front porch. There would be something.
Yeah.
There would be something. So that wasn't fantastic, but, okay. So Nancy goes through the slimy tree snot hole, you know?
Yeah.
And the tree closing up behind her kind of looks like a Disney World trick.
Yeah.
But, and maybe I should have put this in plot, but then that's the end of episode 5.
Yeah.
And then it starts episode 6, and now the hole is open again.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Did it close or didn't it?
It just closed.
Right.
Did it close or did it not close?
Yeah.
If it didn't close, Jonathan could have gone in after her or at least found the tree that she just crawled through.
Right.
But no, it's like, oh, Nancy, where are you? And then I'm like, literally, the tree is open right here, you big dummy. Yeah. So I think that was I don't know if that was just an inconsistency that was missed.
Right.
Or if they did that on purpose, but literally the tree closes up at the end of episode 5, and then at the beginning of episode 6, it's open again.
Yeah.
The effect was cool.
Yeah.
So that's why I put it in aesthetics. But late plot note, why is it open again?
Right.
Anyway, I think the shots when 11 is in the bath world, that's the best way I could describe it, are so beautiful. I want to know how they filmed it. But it's like she's in this dark space. And she's the only thing that's lit.
And the ground is wet.
Yep, and there's just like the thinnest layer of water right on the ground. And so everything is reflected that they light. So they light her up and she's reflected.
Mm-hmm.
You find another character, they light them up, now they're reflected.
Yeah.
I think it's just those shots are so beautiful, and I wish I knew how they filmed those. The only thing I can imagine is that they had some sort of studio that they just blackened, painted black perhaps, and then I want to know how they like hung those lights so that they wouldn't reflect in the water as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it was tricky, but they're just beautiful shots, and like I want to know technically how they were done. So if anybody listening knows or has a link to like a video or anything that would explain how they made those shots, please send it to us, because I would be very interested to hear that. So usually in the end credits of every episode, there's music that plays, some audio.
Yeah.
There was no audio whatsoever at the end of episode 7. And I found that worth noting, because it's the next to last episode, and it leaves you feeling scared for what's going to happen in the finale.
Yep.
It emphasizes that tension. So when they light the Demogorgon on fire in the hallway, and the Demogorgon disappears, there is no damage whatsoever to the hallway. No damage. No burning. No ash. Nothing. There's literally no damage to that hallway. They just lit the thing on fire, and there's no evidence of that. It kind of goes with, like, the porch note from earlier. Like, there should be some evidence of the chaos that just ensued, and there's none. So I'm not a fan of that either. I feel like I have a lot of negatives, but I still gave it 2 out of 2 points.
Yeah.
I think I'm just being nitpicky. I think there's the shot where they're confronting the Demogorgon at the school, and Lucas shoots the slingshot, and the frame is like in him pulling back the whatever it's called of the slingshot, the sling part of the slingshot.
Yeah.
And he lets go, and the shot is so pretty.
Yeah.
I just love the shot. So kudos to that one. And then, okay, so we looked it up because I couldn't remember what my note meant. But the final shot of the series is the Byers family at Thanksgiving dinner. And, or maybe it's Christmas dinner.
I think it's Christmas dinner.
Yeah, it's Christmas dinner. Because the whole scene where Nancy gives Jonathan a present. But, they sit down, and then it zooms out through the window. Yeah. And the snow is just beautiful. It's a beautiful way to end it. But it's still kind of, you still have a little bit of that plot given in the scene before with Will in the bathroom that sets up for the next season. So I think it's a good aesthetic ending. Okay, so 2 out of 2 points for aesthetics for me.
Cool. So I actually gave it 1.5 points out of 2. I think overall the aesthetics are fantastic. I think the score is really good. You kind of touched on, like, you know, with the intro music. I think the score in and of itself, but then also the use of the songs from the 80s. So the fact that they integrate those songs really well into the series, I think, is really good. I think the use of silence to build suspense. When Hopper tells Joyce that Will is dead, there's no audio at all. It is just the dialogue. There's no background music, like nothing. And I think it's just, it gives you this, it adds weight to that kind of news being given to somebody. The overall, just they really establish a lot of tension and mystery. The use of the Demogorgon, you see the silhouette of the Demogorgon. I think, that you see the kind of a shadow over Will when he first gets, taken. The fact that they show that the shots of these unknown people eavesdropping on the entire town sets up this really, like, it sets up a lot of tension. Like, as the viewer, you realize, like, okay, something is going on. They're listening to just, like, ordinary conversation. It's not like they're pinpointing into one person. So somehow the whole town is under surveillance. The fact that, the lights flicker when the Demogorgon is coming. The phone calls from Will, I also, had a note that was really neat. There's just that sound. the use of sound on his end of the phone call. You never hear or see him talking,
right,
but you hear it from Joyce's perspective. The aesthetics in the Upside Down when Barb is first, those shots of Barb in the Upside Down is really the first time you even see what it's like.
Yeah.
And how it's a mirror of our world in this other dimension, if you will, which kind of gives you this visual to Eleven explaining what the Upside Down is when she flips the board over, and
right.
So then they give you a visual of like, what does that mean, and the visuals used there. I think the creature design of the Demogorgon is pretty great. The fact that it's a very humanoid design of this monster makes it very unnerving, and yet it kind of reminds me of the Alien from the Alien franchise films, how it's kind of this very tall humanoid creature, which is innately very unsettling. And yet it has these animalistic qualities that Nancy and Jonathan kind of discover. I think as a creature design, it's just very good. I think the costumes in this show are done really well. Like, the clothes that people are wearing are pretty typical to the 80s and sometimes even like late 70s look. I think the costumes are done really well. I think the fact that they use Christmas lights for, like, in Joyce's house, that she uses Christmas lights and these multicolored lights make for really dynamic lighting effects, if you will, in that last scene when Jonathan, Steve, and Nancy are fighting the Demogorgon. It's those lights flickering, that shot where they're standing in the middle and the lights are flickering and the camera's panning, or it's circling around them.
Yeah.
It just continues to build tension, and yet you have this almost excitement because you're rooting for these. You think, you're expecting the heroes are going to win, but you don't know how big the damage is going to be. But I think it was such an interesting choice to use multicolored Christmas lights to kind of to be the harbingers of the Demogorgon. I just think that's a very unique concept. It's like the Christmas lights are supposed to be like festive and cheery, and they're bringing in this holiday, and yet in this show they mean something very ominous and dangerous.
Yeah.
So that juxtaposition, I think, was a really good aesthetic choice. I also noted the visuals in when Eleven is in the bath. That world that she goes into is, like you said, you already touched on it, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful, and yet it's very scary. Like, you can see why a child would be scared to go into the bath.
Right.
And why also that whole scene where she's going into the bath and she finds the Demogorgon, and reaches out and touches it. It's completely understandable why that would be completely terrifying for an adult, because it'd be very terrifying or why it'd be very terrifying for a child, because it'd be very terrifying for an adult to experience that.
Right.
And so it makes perfect sense why Eleven wouldn't really want to do that ever again.
Yeah.
I think they do a good job of using flashbacks to connect Eleven with this mystery girl of Jane. So by telling the viewer that these are the same people. I think they do a really good job in portraying that for the viewer. And so you're connecting these puzzle pieces as you go, even if the characters that are holding the puzzle pieces haven't connected them yet.
Yeah.
Oh, kind of going back to when Eleven finds the Demogorgon, that use of a clock ticking as, I think overall a ticking clock is often a sound we associate with dread or anticipation or a bomb about to explode.
Right.
And all of those things are relevant and applicable to that scene. The reason I took half a point, though, I didn't give it a full 2 points, is because I think there's moments, from what I can tell, in the Upside Down where there's kind of this blend in the Upside Down of CGI and practical effects. And I think that including when Barb is in the Upside Down, and when Hopper and Joyce go into the Upside Down at the end of the show. I think that there's times where, for me, the CGI effects kind of took me out of that world a little bit. There's parts where, you know that they're walking around on a green screen and they're not walking around in a physical set.
Okay.
Whereas when Barb is in the bottom of an empty swimming pool, it feels like even though I know there are CG effects involved in
they're
that,
a lot more seamless.
There are some practical effects there that feel very grounded to the real world. When Nancy's hand is coming out, when she comes in and out of the snot tree, as you so affectionately call it.
Yeah.
Like, there are very practical, very practical effects used in aspects of that feel grounded to the real world. So when you now have Joyce and Hopper walking around in the Upside Down, I think that there are moments, like those floating specks in the air that are constantly floating in the air, that don't feel grounded. When they walk up to this, eggshell, like that eggshell looks like a real practical effect, but then they're walking, past another, landmark or something, and it doesn't look as real. So I think that just there are parts where the CGI of the Upside Down, and sometimes even some CGI of the Demogorgon, I think that when Eleven reaches out and touches the Demogorgon, it looks like CGI. And I think that having her hand touch a physical, silicone appliance or costume, or which is hard to make silicone look like real skin.
Yeah.
But special effects makeup, I mean, we've seen extraordinary special effects makeup, and I think in other films and media, and I think just having her reach out, having an actor's hand touch something that's CGI, to me always seems unreal. It feels unreal. And I think that a moment like that's really a critical moment, a critical shot of the film, because you're realizing that Eleven found the Demogorgon, that maybe the Demogorgon, and she says, "I opened the gate." Like, this is a critical moment in the show where you're finding that Eleven is the reason that this Demogorgon exists and took Will to begin with, because she found it in the first place. I think a moment like that warrants the extra cost and innovation to create something practical for that actor's hand to touch.
Okay. I agree.
I just think that there are moments where they should have just spent a little extra time and money and gone with a practical effect versus a CGI effect. Although building an entire set of Hawkins to look like the Upside Down really isn't... I understand you can't feasibly do that financially or even, physically, but moments like that I think could have been better if they had used some practical effects.
Okay. Fair.
So, that's all I have for aesthetics.
Okay, so then we're moving into personal taste and preference. I don't have a lot of notes about this, but I'll be brief. I gave it 1.5 out of 2 possible points, and that's because I think it's exceptional, but I think if it had not become huge the way it did, I'm not sure I would have ever watched it. Not as any sort of slight against it, but it's just not the sort of thing that I would gravitate toward naturally, and I'm pretty sure I only watched it because it was big at the time and you had encouraged me to do so. Mm-hmm. Do I regret watching it? Absolutely not, but I don't think that this is the sort of genre that's just not my natural gravitation. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I would have gravitated toward it for any other reasons. But again, I think it's exceptional, so that's why I gave it 1.5 out of 2 possible points for personal taste and preference.
Yeah. I gave it 2 out of 2. I really enjoyed this show. This is one of the few TV shows that I think I will watch more than once. I think season 1, I have seen, season 2 and 3. I do plan to watch season 4. I think that season 1 is absolutely the best season. And I really, really enjoy it. I think the characters have great dynamic. I think the plot is really intriguing. I think it has a lot of rewatchability. You know, the second, third, fourth time you watch it, which, you know, I'm not saying you have to watch it that many times, but at least the second time you watch it, you catch these moments in the plot where you think there's a plot hole, or you think something doesn't make sense, and then you have that question answered 1 or 2 episodes later. I think that it's really engaging. It's paced appropriately. There isn't an episode that felt unnecessary. There aren't episodes that feel like they dragged or were, you know, I think the characters make decisions that feel like decisions that real people would make. The kids are very believable. They don't feel like child actors. So I think overall, I really, really enjoy it. I think that, you know, especially towards the finale, I think that, you know, they do a great job of kind of bringing these characters all together. You're watching all of them work together towards the same goal. One thing that I think is just really genius is it's incidental. It's not intended by the characters, but just the fact that the creators thought through, you know, Nancy and Jonathan decide to fight the Demogorgon or maybe it is decided by the characters, but Nancy and Jonathan decide to fight the Demogorgon at Will's house, and because they've drawn the Demogorgon into the real world, it has kept Hopper and Joyce safe in their search for Will. So if they were in the Upside Down alone, you know, and nobody was drawing the Demogorgon away, then, you know, the Joyce and Hopper probably wouldn't have come out alive. So, you know, things like that are just really thought through very well. And you can tell that this whole project of Stranger Things was it was developed by people who worked really hard to make a show that they enjoyed and were passionate about, and I think that comes through really well in the show. And I enjoy, you know, kind of action. You know, I don't like, and what's interesting is I don't like horror movies. I don't like the horror genre, and I feel like this is more like a sci-fi thriller.
Yeah, I agree.
It could have very easily moved into, you know, a horror genre, but it didn't. It stayed in that kind of sci-fi thriller, mystery kind of action film, but it has enough depth to the characters in the world that it's very engaging. It doesn't feel like you're just watching action scene after action scene. So overall, I really enjoy the show. This is one of the few TV shows that I will watch, you know, especially this season, that I'll watch more than once. So for that, I definitely give it 2 out of 2 for me.
Okay. And for our last category, creativity, out of a possible 1 point, I gave it 1 point.
Okay.
I think that it does a lot of things for the genre, and I think it did a lot of things for Netflix. I think it became a milestone in our pop culture, and I think in a very deserved way, it has become iconic. I think you would be hard-pressed to find somebody in the United States, at least, that has not even heard of Stranger Things. And you know, probably 1 out of every 2 people would tell you they've seen part of it, at least. I think it's just become so well known at this point. And I think it should be celebrated, the success that the Duffer Brothers have found. I think it does some creative things, such as, I mean, we kind of touched on it, but the Christmas lights and the letters on the wall. I mean, sure, it kind of became memed a little bit, but have you ever seen that in anything else ever? No. That's a brand new way that, you know, the creators decided to find a way for Joyce to communicate with her son. So while it is a plot point, it was also an incredibly creative one.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it for that. I also think that the use of the Upside Down is a new twist on this sort of otherworldly alien type thing. Usually you think alien and you think, you know, another planet or something of that nature.
Right.
I think having an idea that there could be these alien creatures that live in a parallel reality to yours is a new, interesting take. And having this psychoanalytic experiment take people that can now cross over into these two parallels is very interesting and new. And so I think in those ways it really shines in its creativity, and I applaud the success that they have found with these things, because I think, sure, is season 2 and season 3 as good as season 1? No, but they have such a perfect package in season 1 that I don't even care that it's now become mainstream, you know?
Right.
Because I think it's well-deserved mainstream, and the notoriety it now has should be, I think, something that is well noted and appreciated.
Yeah. I also gave it a full point for creativity, and a lot for the same reasons that you mentioned. I think, the Christmas light alphabet it's become iconic. I think, the Halloween after this came out, and probably a couple more, like everybody was dressed as 11 for Halloween. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of men were dressed as 11 for Halloween. Yeah. I think that it did something very new and unpredictable, and especially with something on a platform like Netflix. I think it really was the first time that, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems like it really was the first time that streaming services, an independent series developed by a streaming service, was taken seriously. And I think that it really was a catalyst for, places like Hulu, things like, I think Hulu probably was releasing their own series, but, Disney Plus now releases Disney Plus exclusive series and movies. Netflix has exclusive series and movies. And I feel like this was the first series that was really taken seriously as a contender for conventional TV and films released by other studios.
Yeah.
I think that the creators did a great job of building an entire world, not just one story. And that's well conveyed in the entire season. It's not that they just wrote one story and decided to tell one story. They really built a whole world. They built the town of Hawkins, and that all the characters that live in there, it's like the character that you don't even really see, you might see that has one line, that person, has a backstory. We don't know what it is, but it's built so realistically that it's established as very believable. And I think that's something that really is not frequently done in the medium of TV. I think it's easy to just tell, each episode just tells one little sitcom story, and, it doesn't really carry a whole lot of weight. I think one of the things that I really thought was unique to Stranger Things was the fact that they find Will's dead body. So many times people go missing and then they decide that they're dead just out of the blue
with no body. Right.
And the fact that they found Will's body and it fooled enough people that, and the secrecy around it and the people guarding it, it's all suspicious. And, Hopper had the instinct to let's investigate this further, when he found out the state trooper is, and they give all these little hints that something's not right about this. But the fact that as a viewer, I remember watching it for the first time when they showed Will's body on the screen. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to get out of this.
Yeah.
It's
over.
It's over. How are they going to get themselves out of this? And the fact that they were brave enough to show that as part of the story, and then they got out of it, they explained it, and it was realistic and believable. I think that is so unique to these kind of so-and-so goes missing and, they're dead because it's been 2 weeks, we haven't found them. I always thought that was so ridiculous. It's like, they're just missing, you don't have a body, and you're just all everybody just collectively agrees that they're dead.
Yeah.
They actually were brave enough as creators to be like, let's actually have them find Will's body. And it's just a huge twist for the viewer. It's like, oh my gosh, here's a dead kid.
Right.
This is it.
It's this point of no return that you get as a viewer. Yeah.
And I think the fact that they do that in the middle of the show and then continue to push past it. It's just very unique to these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
So 1 out of 1 for me.
Okay, cool. So for just kind of my final wrap-up notes, I think that I'm actually surprised how much we agree on this. I thought this was going to be one of our more polarizing ones, but I'm pleased that we seem to have very similar opinions on this.
Yeah.
My final score out of 10 for Stranger Things Season 1 is 8.5.
Ah.
So...
My final score was also 8.5. So we actually,
Twins!
I think this is the first time we have the exact same score. So 8.5 out of 10. Kind of same thing. I enjoy this season, this show. And so I was expecting to have kind of a high ranking. And so I'm also glad that in watching it, I just found further evidence for reasons of why I enjoy it so much. Let's move into our lightning round.
Okay.
So, and I don't think we've ever explained this, but the person that picks the topic comes up with the questions. So these are my questions for the lightning round. So, favorite character?
I have 3.
Okay. You gotta pick one. Go ahead and list 3 of them, though.
Okay. Hopper, Joyce, and Steve.
Okay.
I think out of all of those, I would pick Joyce as my favorite character.
All right. During this rewatch, I always have said that Steve is my favorite character, but during this rewatch, I would have to say Hopper was my favorite character when I watched it this time. Just the fact that he's so intelligent and so cynical and thinks critically. One note I have that I forgot to mention was that you find out that he actually does know everything that's going on. There's so many moments where you think he's been fooled or he's believing the wrong thing, and you find out that the whole time he knew what he was doing the whole time. And so I really liked it. So this rewatch, I picked Hopper as my favorite character. Least favorite character.
Should we say it together on 3? 3, 2, 1.
Jonathan
Byers.
Yep. You said say it on 3 and then you counted
back.
from 3, but
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all good. All right. Most underrated side character or minor character.
This is hard. I think I'm going to go with Lucas.
Yeah?
I think I'm going to go with Lucas. I like his consistency. I think he's a very understandable character. I think Caleb McLaughlin is very intentional in his acting choices, and I think for that reason I would pick Lucas.
I feel like he's not quite a side character, but I'll concede that.
It's hard. He's kind of in that weird vague between main cast and side.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick a more side character, I'd maybe pick Flo.
Yeah. I picked Benny.
Okay.
I would say Benny is the most underrated. I think he should have more props.
Justice for Benny!
Yep. All right. Favorite 80s song from the soundtrack?
Honestly, I really like Should I Stay or Should I Go? I know that sounds kind of like the easy pick, but I do really like that song in general, so I'll pick that one.
Yeah. So my favorite song from the show would actually be Africa by Toto. However, I don't think it fits that part of the movie very well.
I agree.
I think the song that fits the best with the part of the show is Melt With You by Modern English.
Oh,
I think that,
okay.
and I do like that song.
I like that song too,
but
yeah.
I think it also fits that part of the movie just very, very well.
That's, okay.
Yeah. All right, Team Steve or Team Jonathan?
This is an awful question because who would pick Team Jonathan?
A lot of people pick Team Jonathan, I guess.
Team Steve. Team Steve.
Yep. I agree. Team Steve. The creators clearly picked Team Jonathan. Spoilers for season 2. But
yeah.
All right. Should there be justice for Barb?
Sure. There should be justice for Barb always.
Yep. I agree. All right. Next question. Which of the 3 kids would you want as your sidekick to go up against Hawkins' lab? Dustin, Lucas, or Mike?
This is hard. I think Dustin.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think Dustin.
Why?
Because he, I think, could be a good distraction in the case of, if you would need a diversion. I think Dustin would do very good at diversions.
Yeah.
Also, I think that he is intelligent enough that he wouldn't do anything too reckless without thinking that through.
Yeah. I would pick Lucas. Because he has all the stuff from Nam.
Oh,
I feel
right.
like he would be like your best sidekick. He's got all that stuff and all just packed with snacks. So
Lucas has a slingshot too.
he does, the wrist rocket.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, next question. Choose your weapon against the Demogorgon. A bear trap, a baseball bat, gasoline with a lighter, or a revolver.
I'd pick the revolver. Yeah, you just get some good practice on that, and, you just got to get a good shot, but yeah. I would pick the revolver.
I would pick, and when I said baseball bat, I meant, like, the one with the nails in it.
Yeah.
I'd pick the baseball bat. Because Nancy shot it, like, unloaded the whole revolver on it, and it didn't do anything.
It would probably be very satisfying, too, to beat it with a baseball bat like that.
I think so, too. All right, if you were in the Upside Down, where would you hide?
I would attempt to climb a tree and hang out up there. That would be my attempt. But I don't know if it would be successful.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I would try, is to, like, find, like, the leafiest tree possible that I could find.
Yeah.
And then climb up in that and hide up in there.
Yeah. I would, so I don't know if there's water in the Upside Down because the pool was empty. But if there is water in the Upside Down, I would take a boat and, like, row it into the middle of a lake or something. Because I feel like, I don't know if the Demogorgon can swim or not. But yeah, I would try that. See if that would work.
Is there a boat in the Upside Down?
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, there are trees in the Upside Down, so you could try to make one.
Yeah, that wouldn't be noisy or distracting. I don't know. Or, like, I don't know. Or, I don't know if you could find, like, a really small, like hole to kind of, like, dig in, or,
The snot hole in the trees?
No.
Oh, like a ground hole. Okay,
Why understand. Would you, if you hid in the snot hole, you just get out to be Upside Down.
I'm most ideal.
Oh, goodness. Like a hollowed out tree or something,
Okay.
But...
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode, this 2-part episode. We look forward to having you back on the next episode. Don't forget our social medias. Still follow us there. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Lion and Mouse Podcast. And our website is lionandmousepodcast.com. You can find our rules of engagement there and notes from each episode if you want to look at our scratched notes. We also have a suggestion box there, so please tell us if there's anything you're interested in having us review. Until next time, think wide and stay different.